Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I'm your host, the Football Grump, and with me as always is Mike the Cranky Fan.
Grump, how you doing? It's Monday night. I'm struggling a little bit. My wife was sick all weekend, and I'm starting to feel it. I don't know if she gave it to me or just sitting out in the Meadowlands for God knows how many hours in the freezing cold. But I apologize in advance if I'm sounding a little, shaky with this. We did go for COVID tests today. The results we haven't got back yet, but we're going to struggle through this just like we've struggled through this horrible Giants season together.
Yeah, so we're not going to waste a whole lot of your time for this one, so we'll jump right into it. The biggest news coming off of this loss here, I mean, Dallas won this game 21-6, irrelevant. Kind of knew that was coming. This was sort of like a preseason game in a certain sense. But the biggest news is that the Giants issued this weird press release basically from the medical staff explaining the Daniel Jones move to injured reserve for his neck strain thing. So that just it opens a whole conversation about the quarterback position that you got to start having this conversation pretty loudly and pretty passionately.
Well, first of all, to everybody who I was having very lively debates with today on Twitter, I appreciate it. I really like the Giant fans that we interact with, either who respond to this show or we interact with on Twitter or we hang out with in L16 at the tailgate. So I'm glad we have very, smart, passionate Giant fans. Having said that, I'm the way I feel about this whole thing with this, Glennon versus Jake Fromm thing to me is really, it's a whole big to do about nothing. I don't know how you feel, Grump, but I kind of had a feeling that as soon as Daniel Jones didn't play, in that second week that he wasn't coming back. And, that to me means the season we all pretty much assumed was over really is over. And unfortunately, not only is the season over, it almost kind of puts a pause on how this team is developing for next year. And how do you properly evaluate, the coaching staff, the offense, everything, because you're not playing with your starting quarterback. You're playing with backups. And, Mike Glennon, it's very obvious, is not a very good backup quarterback.
Especially in this game, he looked pretty brutal.
Awful. He is awful. He's been bad all year. He's getting progressively worse and worse. And I've been saying this ever since this show has started. If you have to rely on your backup quarterback, your season's probably over anyway. Unfortunately, this team is not very good. The expectations were not very high for this team. Relatively speaking, this team was not expected to be a Super Bowl contending team, was not expected to be a playoff team. I know some people think that the expectations are higher because of the money that was spent in the offseason. Some comments that were made by Mara, which might have been, misinterpreted a little bit. He never said he expected this team to be a playoff team. He said he hoped this team was a playoff team. And once that gets into the Twitter sphere and becomes parroted on talk radio and becomes a rallying point, doesn't mean it's true. This team was never expected to be that great to begin. It's still part of a rebuild, and we're still working on that path. So the expectation of what your backup quarterback should be on this team and how much money you spend on a backup quarterback dictates who you actually have. The Giants had Colt McCoy last year. They tried to save some money by signing Mike Glennon. Now, it turns out in hindsight, the market for
Colt
McCoy wasn't as great as what the Giants feared it would be, and it ended up being for about the same amount of salary this year. But, he got less than what he was making last year. But the expectation was, this team is not a backup quarterback away difference from making a serious run. And, if this team was down for 3, 4, 5 weeks with a backup, the season was over anyway. So having said that, Mike Glennon is not a good backup quarterback. Mike Glennon will not be back next year. So the anger being raised at Mike Glennon, I just don't understand from, a large part of the fan base. It's like, He is what he is. We are where we are right now. He's going to be gone in a couple of weeks, whatever. My thing is I just don't understand I don't know if it's expectation or the assumption that people think that Jake Fromm is the savior. And the savior of what? I mean, if you're excited because he can be your backup quarterback, we are in more. Our expectations for everything are extremely low that we're excited to have a backup quarterback. If your expectation is, well, let's see what Jake Fromm is, maybe he can be our starting quarterback going forward, I have news to tell you. That's not the case, and that's not what management ownership thinks of what he is. So I think that I want to see what Jake Fromm can do, because what else, I get it. We're all very frustrated with the losing, right? This is what this is kind of coming down to, is you want to have some hope for anything. You're tired of watching this team be non-competitive. You're tired of watching losses. And does Jake Fromm mean we have a better chance to possibly win next week, at Philadelphia? Probably not. I mean, he's a third-string quarterback who's only been on this roster for a couple of weeks, doesn't know the whole playbook, hasn't repped with the first teams that much. But, thinking, what this means in the grand scheme, it means nothing. So I don't know, Grump, I know I'm kind of going around in circles here a little bit, but what is this fascination with Jake Fromm and thinking that it means anything more than just change for the sake of change because it quote-unquote can't be worse than it already is right now?
Well, I mean, I think you hit some things like right on the head, right? Like if, a backup quarterback and its worth is really, can you survive a game and a half to 2 games without your quarterback should the worst happen? So you can actually bring him, when he comes back, he's much closer to 100% than, 85% or something like that. Can you survive that game and a half where he goes down mid-game and you need to close it out and then maybe start next week? Can you scheme around 1.5 games to 2 games? That's really a backup quarterback's main objective. I mean, these stories we see of Nick Foles taking the Eagles to the Super Bowl and winning, and these stories Jeff Hostetler doing a similar thing, that is above and beyond, and those are Super Bowl caliber teams with a backup quarterback, where you are much more flexible in what you can and can't do. So, for much of the NFL, if you go to your backup quarterback for more than 2 games, your season is in serious jeopardy. I mean, you have to be in a, competing for a bye to suffer something like that.
And there's exceptions to the rule. It doesn't mean it's
of course
a guarantee your season over, but realistically, and the odds say you are going to suffer because quite frankly, the level of play drops. There's only, we make fun all the time in the league. It's like there's not enough starting quarterbacks to go around the league because we watch some of these teams. It's like, why is player X starting in this league? He's awful. So when you get past, the 32 starters and you start getting into the second tier of backup quarterbacks, you're looking at very, guys that are intelligent guys that are probably be coaches at some point who are de facto support guys, coaches on the roster as it is. That's kind of their primary role. Guys like Brian Schottenheimer, for example, when he was, a backup quarterback for Florida, backup quarterback in the league a little bit, but he was really trying to work his chops to become an offensive coordinator down the line. That's why these guys are in the league. That's why they have jobs.
Yeah, so I mean, it just stands to reason that if you're a 500 team, you're 4-4 in the middle of the season, your starting quarterback goes down, you have to go 4 games with your backup. I mean, right there, you're looking at potentially being 4-8. If you do go to the playoffs after that because your quarterback comes back, it's going to take 5 straight to get you to 9-8 and get you to the. So this is what we're saying. We're just if you have to rely on a backup quarterback for that long, your season is probably over at that point, unless, again, the exceptions are you're competing for a first round bye in the playoffs or whatever. You're at that point, you're a Super Bowl contending roster, and you are much more flexible schematically. So I agree. Being excited to see if you've got your backup next year or not, some of us, like, I get excited for stuff like that because I'm a junkie. If you're a casual fan, that's a pretty low. I mean, I don't really know what you expect to see. So you're going to see a guy that, oh yeah, I think we've got the guy on the roster that can make it through a game and a half. I mean, that's very, very unexciting, even if you have found it.
Grump, who was the quarterback we drafted? Was it Alex Tanney, I think, where...
We didn't draft him, but we had him.
Then it wasn't Tanney, then. It was... Who was the guy we got from Syracuse?
Ryan Nassib.
Nassib. Remember what the quote was? We drafted him so we'd hopefully never have to play him?
Yeah, I think that was the... I mean, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what the mentality of, like, well, let's see what our backup quarterback is.
Right, you know what? Because he was the first quarterback we had drafted when Eli was here, I think, maybe. I mean, like, obviously we had other guys on the roster and whatever, but I think Ryan Nassib was the first quarterback that was drafted since Eli had been... Well, that was after the second Super Bowl, so this was the Jerry Reese, air quotes, twilight of Eli's career moment. So that was, like, a big deal. And then that quote was important,
I don't think he was ever drafted to be the heir apparent.
He was not. Yeah, no, that's the point. That's why that quote was so important, and that quote applies to backup quarterbacks in general.
And remember something, with a backup quarterback, a guy like, we're talking about Mike Glennon, or we're talking right now about Jake Fromm or something. You know what percentage of the salary cap is allocated towards a backup quarterback? Like 1/187th of the salary cap.
Yeah.
That puts in perspective, what value is placed on your backup quarterback. It's really kind of like it's a break the glass plan to get somebody to play. And your third string quarterback has a completely different role on your roster as your backup quarterback. Your third string quarterback is the guy who takes reps in practice because you don't want to throw your guy's arms out during practice. He's the guy who runs the scout team. He's the guy who's the backup in case the starter gets hurt and you have an emergency guy to play there. I mean, the Giants went into the season with 2 quarterbacks. I would be very shocked if they go into the season next year with 3 quarterbacks again. The only reason he's on this roster is because Daniel Jones went down and they needed a backup. They needed an emergency backup. So let's not fool ourselves that there's a master plan.
Well, I mean, he jumped Lewerke on the roster.
Lewerke, throws like this, so he's fine. Although if you look at Jake Fromm, I mean, if you watch his throwing motion,
it is weird.
It's very weird.
So I will correct you on one thing. I don't know that they fished for Mike Glennon to save money. I think they wanted a backup quarterback that had the deeper arm. Because Colt McCoy, they had to eliminate a decent chunk of their playbook when he played because they simply, and we saw it when they tried to run some of the plays, it was a disaster. I mean, it was kind of like a trebuchet throw. Whoop! Lost your camera there, buddy. Yeah, I mean, so that was really, I think, and what was really interesting about it is that was another one of the offseason moves that just made it appear that it was like, oh man, we really are going to have a more downfield offense this year. We go out there, we drafted Kenny Golladay, and we signed Kenny Golladay, we drafted Kadarius Toney, we got Mike Glennon as our backup quarterback now. Like, it's clear we're throwing downfield. So that was the big head scratcher. So I think some of the money thing, whatever, but I think the soul of what you were actually saying is still kind of true. Like, I think they knew that Mike Glennon was still not a very high caliber quarterback or anything of the sort. It was simply a backup quarterback that was going to fit the offense better in case he needed to play. We had somebody that could play the way we wanted. He's just not very good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and here's the thing that's going to be interesting next year. Daniel Jones, he's out on IR this rest of the season. We really don't know the extent of this neck injury. So do we know he'll be ready to start, throwing with teammates and stuff in the offseason? Do we know, will he be ready for OTAs? Will he be ready for training camp?
Here's what we do know. I will say what we do know, though. We know that it's just contact with him. His throwing motion, all of that stuff is all fine. That's why he's able to throw, and he was able to practice just the way he would as a quarterback, since it's a non-contact practice position anyway. It's just being cleared for contact, which is, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about it. It doesn't sound that serious to me, But that's kind of irrelevant to my bigger point about Daniel Jones anyway. So I'm sorry. Just go ahead.
Yeah. So my point being is that, you know, besides all the other things that we've been concerned about Daniel Jones for what his durability, the concussion, this, that, the other thing, the importance of a backup quarterback is probably greater next year than it was this year or last year even. So again, no offense to Jake Fromm, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but the thought of, well, what can he do? He is what he is, and I really don't know what you're going to see out of the guy to make you think not only can he be a capable backup in an emergency, but a guy who may have to play, and maybe a lot. If Daniel Jones for some reason never gets this is a possibility that he may never get clearance to play. I mean, it's a neck. He could injure it again or something. It could be a chronic thing. I don't think they're going to want to go into next year with a guy that we don't know, and just because he had a nice drive and complete garbage time.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that garbage time drive there. That was pretty much preseason level of defense from Dallas Cowboys there. Don't get to it. I don't know that I saw a single person get that excited about it, but if you were internally getting excited about it, don't get excited about it.
We were on the train already. We left.
Yeah, I was gone. But I mean, I've seen it. I watched it.
The train was. You heard people a little like oh, kind of like from people like who were watching the game on their phones. Like there was a weird excitement level because he was completing some passes. Now again, we've been beaten down so badly this season that anything makes us happy. But that's the coaching staff is looking at every rep in practice. And so, that's going to make their evaluation.
Right, exactly. I mean, you have plenty of practice time to evaluate from. He's an exclusive rights free agent, so there's no reason to panic about him or anything like that. But, I mean, the excitement, I think, what am I trying to say? What was palpably different between the two quarterbacks on the field was that Mike Glennon is very stuck on his first read. Really staring down. So he appears terrible. It's very obvious to even casual football fans that, like, mechanically there's problems there, but also that he just doesn't move very well. Jake Fromm was able to avoid some rush stuff with his own feet, which makes him look like a more capable backup. Now, the point at the very top of this, though, is that Mike Glennon is not going to be the backup next year. He looks like dog shit. It's not good enough.
And the other thing, Grump, to go with that is not only will he not be next year, Jake Fromm is not going to be competing with Daniel Jones to be the starter next year. So no. even if for some reason and against what you and I believe, he is named as the backup quarterback next year, let's put in perspective of what that really means. It's really kind of a who cares?
Well,
honestly,
I'll tell you what.
The amount of attention it's getting and the amount of ink it's going to get this week and the amount of discussion we're spending on this even.
I mean, like, we're arguing from a position of defeat here because, in all honesty, we should want Jake Fromm to go out there and play lights out because he costs like $400,000. I mean, I would love for that because now the next question we have is what happens to Daniel Jones before next season starts, because the fifth-year option becomes a very, very real conversation. And there is, I would say, fair arguments on both sides of what to do about it, because this isn't just a fifth-year option on a kicker. This is a fifth-year option on the most expensive position in, I don't know, all of sports, maybe? Who knows? When I initially broke this down, and there's no way to get the actual cost right now, you can only get an estimated cost, and it's going to be north of $20 million. That is guaranteed. So once you sign this deal, the dead cap number for cutting them that fifth year is the full amount. So again, this is not no $7 million figure. This is north of $20 million. So this is a very, very serious decision for a guy who has not had a single year so far that was quantifiably good.
Yes, but now also...
I'm not making a case or anything by saying that. I'm just stating the starter there.
That is true, but I mean, if we want to break down his career to date, we've talked about this ad nauseum, all of the reasons why he hasn't had that quantifiable opportunity to prove himself. We've talked about the COVID year. We've talked about he's on his third play caller in his career. We've talked about all the injuries. We've talked about the offensive line. We talked about the injuries to himself. We talked about a multitude of things that we honestly have no idea of what we have in this quarterback. And it reminds me a little bit of, it's a completely different era, no salary cap, but what did we have in Phil Simms after the first couple of years? A guy that was injured quite a bit on a very bad team. And, the old timers who are listening to this know there was like, why did we even draft this guy? And why are we bothering with him? Now, of course, there's a salary cap and the money is a factor, but there's a lot of things you have to think about. It's not just such a cut and dry thing of $20 million. Like, what does $20 million, where does that rank in NFL starting quarterbacks for salary next year?
Well, the whole point is, actually, I can give you the exact rule here. Hang on. That is, the fifth-year option rule is, and so for Daniel Jones, we already know what it will be, but there's several rules here. So for him, it would be, let's see. So it's dictated by performance now. So with 2 or more Pro Bowl selections, so that obviously not Daniel Jones right there. On the original ballot during the first 3 seasons of contracts, the fifth-year option is the franchise tender, which is the average of the 5 highest salaries for a player's position in the 4th year of the contract. 1 Pro Bowl selection, so still not Daniel Jones, on the original ballot during the first 3 seasons deal puts the 5th-year salary at the transition tender, which is the average of the 10 highest salaries from a player's position in the 4th year of the contract. Okay. Participating in 75% of offensive or defensive plays, whichever is applicable, which is Daniel Jones now we're talking about, in 2 of the first 3 seasons of deals, or an average of at least 50% playtime in each of the first 3 seasons, sets the 5th-year average at the average of the 3rd through 20th highest salaries at a player position. So that's where that number comes from.
Okay, so 3rd to 20th. So
just for the quarterback position, though, remember, wait.
Has he qualified for that?
Yes.
Has he played enough snaps for that?
I think so, yeah. Because it's only out of 2 of the first 3 seasons. He has to play 75%.
Okay, so the first year, he didn't.
The first year, he only missed 3 games.
He only missed 3 games the first year?
He played week 3, and he missed that game Eli came back against the Dolphins.
That's correct.
So I would say he definitely hit that one in the first year, and he played all of last year, didn't he? With minus 2 games with Colt McCoy?
Yeah, he missed the Seattle game, he missed another game, yeah.
This would be the only year that I think sets him.
Okay, so he's somewhere between 3 and 20.
Right, and what I'm saying is that the quarterback payout for that 3 through 10 is massively different than like 11 through 15 and then 16 through 32 or 20 or whatever we're talking about here. Those are very big different chunks of numbers that skew the number. And I did a preliminary guess as best as I could of what the contracts would be somewhere about in that year would put him north of 20 million. Now that could be wrong based on the way things shake out, but that was my best guess at the time, which was at the bye week only a couple weeks ago.
Okay, so we're looking at probably in terms of starting quarterbacks 1 to 32, probably somewhere slightly north of the median.
Yes.
For 1 year.
Yes.
Right. So to me, that doesn't seem like as much as a massive risk for a guy that, for 1 year. I mean, if it was something where it was like, you're guaranteeing for 3 more years at that number, that's one thing. But for 1 year, I mean, unless something catastrophically goes south on the guy, because we're also expecting, our assumption is this offensive line between now and that 5th year will improve. We are hoping that the physical health of this team can't be as bad as it was this year. We are hoping by year 5 that the general manager / coaching situation will be solidified more, whether Joe Judge is still here and he has hired a different offensive coordinator, one that's improved over Jason Garrett, or we keep who we have now and there's continuity and it just starts to gel more, all of these things. So to me, if we're paying somewhere a little slightly north of the median, that doesn't seem as much as a risk as saying the number 20 million scares you. When you put it in perspective of everybody else, it doesn't seem that bad in for 1 year. And if it doesn't work, and the other thing to factor into this too, Grump, is that there are other needs on this team, bigger needs, I feel, than the quarterback. That for high draft picks, I don't want to waste just yet on a quarterback. We have to address this offensive line very, very badly. We have to address, edge rushing on this team badly, linebacker badly. Those to me are issues that are bigger, concerns that I'd rather address with very, very high draft picks. We have the 2 this year. Next year we'll probably have another high draft pick and stuff. So when you factor all of these things in together, I'm willing to take that risk for a 5th year. And if it doesn't work, and we move on and we address from there. But I think right now I'm willing to take that risk.
So I think that's a pretty compelling point right there. Like it is really just middle of the pack money.
In short term.
Yeah, and your evaluation of him is at least marginally. I mean, it's more than marginal. We have to concede that it's more than marginally skewed by just the talent around. Now, some of that is a little bit of excuse because Daniel Jones has not been. There's plenty of things to point out that he needs to get better at. That is fair, but I mean, to say that he was in a perfect situation and he's not getting better is an absolute lie, and no one really thinks that, right? So. It is a perfectly fair point to say it's middle of the pack money. We didn't even get a chance still to evaluate our guy, which is our bad. But the fact remains that if you don't do this and now he outplays, you're not going to have to outbid somebody else to keep him. But it may have been a flash in the pan 1 year thing. So now you're not going to sign him to a 1 year deal at that point. You're signing him to many years. Now you're tying yourself to him. That's a fair point. I agree with that. The biggest problem with that, though, is the way that contracts were structured to get guys in here to be playmakers for him or to make this team better, etc. now become potential cap casualties. And the whole reason you brought them in was for the talent, that they were worth the money. Now you have guys like Leonard Williams, who played through a serious enough injury in this game and didn't play poorly. I mean, that's even if he's only doing it for his own selfish statistics, whatever. That still is something that, if this is a better team, you are so proud of the fact that this guy is doing this for your team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of irrelevant, the fact that it's just for his statistics or whatever. But I mean, you have guys that you're paying a lot of money to in 2023 that you intentionally brought in, guys like Adoree Jackson, $16.5 million, but $4.5 million dead cap. So maybe you're going to cut somebody who is very talented and can help your team. You have so many guys like this. I mean, the big ones are Logan Ryan, $12 million cap hit, $3 million dead money in that year. 2023, let's look at Leonard Williams is what? He is $25.5 million, only $7.5 million dead. And the biggest, obviously, is Kenny Golladay, $21 million, $10 million dead. Is he now a dead cap? Is there a potential that he's a casualty because you did this 5th-year option with Jones? He is. And that is what you have to weigh.
Well, Grump, there's also the massive elephant in the room, too. Saquon Barkley.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's something, if we're trying to... how are we going to handle the salary cap in 2023 and beyond? A decision has to be made about what are we going to do about Saquon Barkley based upon, his physical, durability. And quite frankly, the way the season's been going, how we're using him. And what does his coaching staff really think of him? I mean, we can, we can probably take a couple seconds to talk about the usage of Saquon Barkley since he's been back. He hasn't looked good coming back this year, but I think we can both agree yesterday was the best we've seen him look as far as having moves, being quick, doing things that, look like the old Saquon Barkley. The problem is, where is he?
Yeah, so I think that's fair. They have kind of dialed back his reps, and it looks like a lot more of a 1-2 punch with him and Booker. And I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, if there, is any, or if it's simply game planning. But it certainly seems that there's no this offensive line didn't get better this year, and it didn't get better because guys got hurt and there was no work done to address the depth. You know what I mean? That's what happened. That is the story. Saquon Barkley is not going to have a great rushing year because of this offensive line this year. Even Saquon Barkley, Devontae Booker's not going to have the best year of his career. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever. You get my point. Like, you just concede that at this point. You've got a guy coming back from an ACL tear that you're spending a boatload of money on. That's already tied. That's done. You've got this superstar. You want to get the most of it. At this point, maybe it's best to just manage his reps, let him work his ACL back in ways that are just not entirely on him, where it's just like, okay, you're back, you're going to play 95% of the snaps, you know.
And that may be what's going on right now too.
It might be. It seems that way. But I think in the last 3 games, we've slowly seen him get better and better into the swing of things. I mean, he's still not the Barkley we saw, from 2 years ago or whatever, but he is noticeably become. If he were a rookie that just did this, he'd be like, oh, who's this kid? You know what I mean? So
I guess, right now, and again, there's a lot more things we have to see. Would you rather give Barkley a big money extension, or would you rather give Daniel Jones the 5th-year option?
I'd rather give Daniel Jones the 5th-year option if those are my 2 choices. I don't know what you do with Barkley. He's just destined to be gone at this point unless you're deciding to make a huge investment in a guy. Because I just don't see how he's worth $7 million next year. That's his 5th-year option. That's what we're tied to. We're stuck with that. So I just don't know. There's no way to extend him unless you're paying more than that. I mean, or just slightly less of that, and you're getting him for several years at a very high price. There's just no way he's staying around. I don't know. I mean, I think he's just got to be gone, and that by default it goes to Daniel Jones. But I also see your side of the Daniel Jones thing. I think it's a pretty fair point. It's worth kind of seesawing in my mind about what I want to do, and it makes me want to kick the can down closer to the decision point later on.
Mm-hmm. I think we need more information on Daniel Jones because Daniel Jones still has the potential, and I think if you pair him with a offensive coordinator who best utilizes his skill set, you match him up with an offensive line that does his best to protect him in the scheme you want to put him in the best position to succeed. You keep building these weapons that he has. I mean, again, you have a Kenny Golladay, you have a Kadarius Toney. I mean, we forget about Kadarius Toney. He's been pretty much a non-factor this year, but he'll be back next year. And we saw what he could do, the joystick ability, and he can create something out of nothing. I'm just not ready to give up on him yet.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, we never discussed the possibility of trading for Russell Wilson.
It's true.
I mean, so let's just pretend that it's a legit, because I don't know how legit it is. I mean, some people say the interest in New York for him is very, very real for personal reasons, etc. I mean, what would you trade for him?
Nothing.
Okay.
This team is way too far away to be gutting, future assets to get a quarterback who is not young. I mean, how old is Russell Wilson? He's been in the league now.
Ooh, I just had it up too. Hang on.
Yeah, he's not a spring chicken. And, again, I don't even know how we're worrying about
Russell Wilson had no, you easy on that spring chicken because Russell Wilson is just a little bit younger than me. He's 33.
Okay, Junior.
Thank you.
But I mean,
I'm hoping to grow hair on my chest very soon.
We have any more of those shots you did at the tailgate, you probably will have some hair.
We're not going down that road. That's.
But no, I mean the guy's 33 years old. We're worrying about how are we going to be able to afford Daniel Jones for 1 year at $20 million. How are we going to fit him into the salary cap?
Well, let me tell you a little something about the salary cap for Russell Wilson. In 2022, it's less than $20 million.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. It's the cap hit is actually $37 million.
$37 million. I was going to say, nuts?
I was kidding.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about something that could be potentially double what the amount of Daniel Jones is.
But I think it's not so much the $20 million for Daniel Jones is a lot of money is that it's a lot of money for something that you have seen nothing quantifiable, and you have to make the decision now before you'll ever be able to see anything more. That's the thing. And so part of that also is, as fans, we only see what we see. We don't see anything in practice as well, which can be a negative as well. Don't think that I'm defending Daniel Jones when I say that. He may not be as sharp in practice. He may look like maybe he doesn't pay as much attention as he should. Maybe he doesn't pick up on things in the film room. We don't know any of that stuff. So those are things that are factored in as well.
Right, but let's get back to Russell Wilson. Again, the acquisition cost, forget the cap hit. They're going to probably want 2, 3 number 1 picks, probably other assets that we have on this team. We can't afford to be giving that stuff away. I mean, look at this roster. Even in the best of times with everybody healthy, we need to build this offensive lineup. And we're going to say that every single day on this show and every single day on Twitter until it's fixed. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. It could be Daniel Jones or Russell Wilson or Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter. Without an offensive line, they're going to be on their back. They're going to be throwing picks. There's going to be a lot of 3 and outs. So it just doesn't make any sense to bring a guy like him. And also, why would Russell Wilson want to be on this team? If stay in Seattle.
Well, I mean, I think that's. I've made that point. People have said that it's kind of the end of his career. It's going to be like the last 5 years he plays football. Maybe 5 years is a little conservative. Maybe it's slightly over 5, because a lot of these quarterbacks are playing closer to 40 years old now. So no, but 5 years is about right.
Quarterbacks are though.
I know, but what
if they have great offensive lines to protect them, they never hit.
Right.
That's not happening in New York right now.
Okay. But the reason he wants to come here is to, at the end of his career, be in a position where he can do philanthropic things, and his wife can do things out of New York. There is a legit interest there, selfishly, or whatever. So there is an interest for him to come here, period. Now, you can also say that he's just open to it, when he meets the front office or whatever, he doesn't feel like this team is headed in a direction where it's ever going to get any better, then maybe he shuts the door on that right away and he goes somewhere else. I don't know. I'm not saying that is a slam dunk thing. It's just enough for there to be interest for him, on top of the fact that he's going to be able to make money on endorsement deals out here like crazy anyway. So in the short term, he makes more money even if he makes less money.
Aaron Rodgers makes more money than God in endorsements. He plays in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
But Aaron Rodgers, don't do that, and you know why you did that. What I'm going to slam you for on that. That is such an outlier that there is an Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. I mean, there is Baker Mayfield may not be on commercials next year. Now he's not in commercials because he's in Cleveland. He's in commercials because he was a personality coming out in the draft and had some early success. Baker Mayfield not be in any commercials next year, and that's partly because he's in Cleveland. If Baker Mayfield were a Dallas Cowboy, even with the way he's playing, he'd be in commercials.
Yeah.
So again, we're talking markets thing.
LeBron James played in Cleveland at the beginning of his career too, and he was.
Yeah. Okay. So you cherry picked literally the biggest athlete superstar in the history of American sports.
Is Russell Wilson one of the?
No, he's not. That's my point. But going to
most marketable people in the NFL.
5 most? No, I don't think so. Maybe he's in the top 15 for sure. I don't know that he's even in the top 10. I don't know. It's not even the point. I'm not arguing for him. I'm saying that there is reportedly real interest there, and a lot of it has to do with his afterlife. his afterlife.
His afterlife.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I mean, playing behind this offensive line.
He's not Jesus Christ. He's Lazarus. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
So I mean, maybe. As far as backup quarterbacks for next year goes, since we know it's not going to be Glennon, but we want someone with an arm, you're thinking Jameis Winston, right?
Please. God. You want to see me swinging from a tree somewhere and hanging myself? Let's go back one more thing about Russell Wilson before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
If Russell Wilson is the quarterback and nothing else changes, how good is his team?
Oh, come on. We all know the answer. I know where you're going with that, but yeah, I agreed. But I think also it's one of those things where it's like you draft a Josh Rosen, but Kyler Murray is falling into your lap sort of situation. It's like, yeah, the kid had a bad year. I still think we can work with him. I believe in him a lot, but I'm not passing up this opportunity for you. I think that's a lot of people's thinking with the Russell Wilson, Daniel Jones thing.
Right, but I'm just asking that, how much, with the same level of talent coming into this into this season, and then with the injuries that happened, I mean, this team,
I
even
agree. I agree.
Yeah. That's my bigger point of this whole thing, is that this is not a quarterback problem with this team. That I know people are not convinced on Daniel Jones, or people never wanted him in the first place.
Well, nobody should be convinced.
Right, of course, but he is not the reason this team is where it is right now. He might be in one of the 7 reasons, but he is not number 1 and not number 2 and probably not number 3 either. So even if you bring in a Russell Wilson, you're not moving the needle that much on this team making that big leap from being a bad team to all of a sudden, it's not like bringing in Tom Brady to the Bucs.
Yeah, I mean, there's more wins there if Russell Wilson's here, but I mean, at best, you're looking at the 2016 Giants, which is no, that's not happening. I'm sorry, not with what happened this year. At best, you're looking at maybe the 2015 Giants or something like that, where they'd still miss the playoffs, but they were kind of competitive. It was down to the wire at the end there, something like that. There's no way they were winning 12 games with Russell Wilson this year. So I don't know. I was talking out of my ass.
Now, Grump, there is one thing, though, that's going to make this team better, and we're seeing it every week. It's the defense on this team.
It is the defense on this team.
And every week we are seeing, from a very shaky start to this season, we are seeing a defense get better and better and better. And even with having guys off the street in the secondary and all the things we have going on, they did their best. And I guess the best thing I can say about Joe Judge right at this moment is this is a defense that's getting no help from the offense.
None.
No help from special teams. None of this stuff, and has not quit. They are still playing for their head coach. They are still playing for their defensive coordinator. They are playing for themselves. So that, is something, if we're looking for things to get excited about for next year, and it's for, the hell with Jake Fromm, the hell with Mike Glennon.
Right.
Look at the other side of the field. Now, one of the things that Grump and I were talking all game was, what the hell was Dallas thinking in their game planning? Why were they not attacking the obvious weak points of this defense last year? Why did they play so conservatively? Why did they just want to play to just get through this game, get out of there with a win, and that's that? But the defense still had to execute, and the defense made a very, very good offense look very, very pedestrian.
Yeah, I mean, there was that point in the second quarter there where Dallas was just punishing for several minutes, running the ball. And, I mean, that's not really what they want to do that early. I mean, that's kind of their closeout, That's how they end games there. But they put up points, they throw downfield. They were throwing down the field a little bit. They got some big plays here and there, but this should have been a nightmare. And I mean, we stayed at this game way longer than I wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, there was no it was close enough. We were arguing over going for it on 4th down and stuff like that in the stands. It's just like, it shouldn't have happened. This game, we should have been, and especially the way the second quarter was looking, the second quarter was brutal for the Giants there. They really got their teeth kicked in on the ground, but they stayed in this whole game, and there were some really bright spots there. Lorenzo Carter, I know he's in a contract year. He's probably not a starter. He's probably not, but and I get that, Tyron Secchi's playing left tackle for Tyron Smith here, so don't think that goes over my head. But on the first drive alone, he had a tackle for a loss, a batted pass that he nearly also almost picked, and almost had a strip sack on the first drive. He would later have 2 more sacks in this game. Lorenzo Carter easily had the best game that I remember seeing him in. I would have to dive into his early stuff to find a game where he was had more of an impact than this game.
Can I throw an out of the box thought I had at you and tell me if I am completely crazy, or not that it would ever happen, but do you think this is something that could possibly make sense? None of us are really impressed with Joe Judge overall. We're not really thrilled with his decision making, clock management, the over conservatism. But we also know that the Giants do not like change. They are loyal. They don't like to upset the apple cart. What do you think about the thought of, if there's a new GM, launching Joe Judge and elevating Patrick Graham to be the next head coach? We know Patrick Graham is probably going to interview for head coaching jobs around the league this offseason. He did last year, or I think he had interviews and canceled interviews. There definitely had interest from other teams. Do you think that, if to kind of keep some sort of continuality with this team from this coaching staff to the next, would you be in favor of a move like that? Or
I would. I don't think you're nuts. I think that I would, if I had to choose and say, one of these two guys are going to go. It's either going to be Joe Judge or Patrick Graham. I'm going to be much more upset if it's Patrick Graham that's going. That's for sure. But I mean, I'm lukewarm on the idea, and that's because Patrick Graham. It's not as if Patrick Graham has some head coaching credentials. It's not. He's a very good defensive coordinator, but he's also a very young defensive coordinator. It's not like he's been a defensive coordinator for a very long time. He could get figured out and be not that impressive, for next year and for forever. So to me, and this is my biases and this is my immediate answer, I'd probably have to think about it a little bit more, but one of the things that I do love so much about Joe Judge is that he is so CEO-like and hands-off. I hate seeing offensive coordinators or head coaches that are just buried in a playbook. I hate seeing defensive coordinators doing the same thing. I really, really dislike that. I like guys detached from the side of the ball, managing the game. Now Joe Judge does these things and he mismanages the fucking game. So there's whatever. But I don't know what we're gonna get with Patrick Graham. He is such a good defensive coordinator. He's so creative, and that must require a ton of hands-on stuff. And if you're telling me that moving him to head coach is gonna make that suffer, I have to believe that it would make it suffer. I want to know what the head coaching benefit is of Patrick Graham. Is it simply to keep him here? I don't know.
I mean, again, my thinking for this is, again, how the Giants, they believe in keeping it in the family. And, there's more than likely the next GM is going to be someone who's either in the building right now or has ties to the Giants in a past life. And again, my thought also is he's probably going to get some interest somewhere else. So the league and other teams are very curious on whether this guy could be the guy. I mean, I guess the first thing is you have to make the decision: do you want to move on from Joe Judge or not? And that's probably not going to happen. This is kind of a moot exercise, but
if you're asking me if we're going to pull a Ben McAdoo kind of situation where it's like we're going to lose him, we got to make him head coach, I don't want to do that.
Okay, that's fair.
I think that's like, that just screams panic to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I'm only reason I'm even thinking this because I know the way the Giants work. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's, again, I would, if I was an owner, if I was a GM, I would not operate the way this organization operates, where everything is inside the giant bubble. I mean, we have a decade of futility. There's been other errors, ERAS, of the Giants where they've done that same thing, and the league has had to step in and force a general manager on this organization, because the family business doesn't run that way. I'm just saying that, that might be that could be some that might be an appeasement thing for a new GM with ownership. Maybe it's like, okay, new GM comes in, I'm not a Joe Judge guy, I don't want him. That could be some sort of thing that's worked out, is they keep Patrick Graham. I'm just saying it's just something to think about.
Sure.
Do we?
It's a possibility that it comes up. You know what I mean? The fact is if he's going on head coaching interviews, then you have to prepare for the fact that he's going to leave, and that means you have to prepare for, do I fire Joe Judge to keep Patrick Graham here? Is really what ends up happening.
I think I don't now. I'm not trying to split hairs, but I don't fire Joe Judge to keep Patrick Graham. To me, it's if the decision is made, I don't want Patrick Graham anymore. I'm sorry, I don't want Joe Judge anymore.
Then do you consider him?
My first
Absolutely.
my first move would be, which might make the selling of firing Joe Judge to ownership a little more palatable. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either, but
It's just that's a huge switch from an investment they made into another guy that has no background. Like this is just another swing for the fences while you're in mid swing. So
yeah.
I just and I get it. There's plenty of reasons to be like I'm out on Joe Judge. I don't know that I'm there yet, but if I get it for the people who are.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm not there. I'm not there yet. I'm very. The jury is definitely out, but I am definitely.
that car is teetering off the cliff.
But
Though.
I'm in the deliberation room making my case that I really don't want him. I'm trying to get other jurors to say maybe we go to my side and probably get rid of him, but I'm not there yet.
Other than that, I guess the
Good
last
times.
thing, the last thing to really end on here is a bit of a sad note. Sterling Shepard tears his Achilles in this game. It really in a useless game, in a useless moment, in a useless game. And because of his cap situation next year, I think we've really seen the very last of Sterling Shepard in Giants blue, unless he retires here, on one of those one-day contracts or whatever.
I want to retract. I tweeted something out yesterday in the moment of it that I was trying to I was just very frustrated and aggravated with everything yesterday, equating you brought in the backup quarterback and you're forcing things, and that's one of the reasons why he got hurt, which, obviously watching the film again and everything, that's pretty silly and it's kind of a stupid thing to say, but it's really unfortunate for a guy like him because,
he's a good guy,
He's a good guy. He's been a really good Giant. He's had tough breaks. He's been through a lot with this team. He has potential to make some money somewhere else. But
it's a serious injury too.
It's a very serious injury at the worst time of the season. It's not like it happened in week 2 and you can recover all off the rest of the season, off season and stuff. It's like you're starting from square one at the very beginning. So it's a real. I mean, he's never going to be a Ring of Honor guy. He's never going to be, but he's going to be one of those guys where if he comes back if they ever retire, I don't know, Saquon Barkley's number or something, he'll be one of those guys who's going to be on the, the stage, wearing his uniform with him, and he'll get a nice round of applause. He's that type of guy. So it's too bad, but it's a tough game.
In any case, the Giants play the Eagles next week. That's important. It's always important. There won't be Daniel Jones, but there'll be people complaining about whatever quarterback's in there. So be sure to see us on Christmas Eve. Are we going to do an episode Thursday night?
I will be. God, I'm a freaking loser. I will be at the Gasparilla Bowl watching Florida play UCF if I do not have COVID. So we will record somewhere, some point. Grump, are you around during the day to record? Because I can do it during the day, probably.
I think so. I don't think I got a whole lot going on that day. So whatever. The point is, there will be a Christmas Eve. You guys all get a very early Christmas present. Your Christmas Eve morning, you will have a new episode of Just Giants for you, previewing that very important Eagles game.
Hey, something? We laugh, but something? That's what makes football better than any other sport. And we had this discussion last night about college versus the NFL. It doesn't matter when you're playing the teams you hate. You still want to beat those teams.
Let's be Cranky Fan. Seriously, how good would it feel to win and knock out their chances of going to the playoffs entirely? I don't know. I don't know if they have a mathematical chance, but if they do, I want to be the team that knocks them out.
After what those scumbags did last year, and trying to draft by trolling this year, and all the bullshit they've done, over time and everything, and for their idiotic cheesesteak fans and everything, it would be fantastic. I mean, at this point now, all we are looking for are moral victories, things that we can kind of say, give us anything. We've been suffering through horrible football. We're suffering through a bad roster, having these inane debates about backup quarterbacks and turf and Jesus Christ. It would be great. to win 2 in a row against Philly this year.
Yeah, would really would. That would be 3 in a row, actually.
Yeah. So something. Let's go down there. Let's win a football game and at least feel good about ourselves for a couple of moments in our life.
I would like that. So be sure to listen to that episode Christmas Eve morning or whenever that Christmas weekend. As always, we're on.
Where are we?
We're on Twitter at @football_grump and at the Cranky Fan, as well as the show at Just Giants Pod. And of course, we are on YouTube as well, where you can see our bright, smiling faces.
Grump?
Yep.
I was gonna say, well, I will talk to you before, but if not, to you and to all of our loyal listeners and viewers, Merry Christmas. It's been a rough year, football wise and health wise and everything, but we're all glad we're all in this together. It's been great meeting all of you guys at the tailgates, with Justin and Snacks and those guys at L16. It's been great, with Twitter with all of you guys. It's been great with everything. And let's just let's finish the season strong and get ready for the rebuild of this team together.
All right, guys. So we will see you soon. Go Giants.
Go Giants.